Hello, it's time to talk about how I wasted money in the months of May and April of 2023. Why am I combining 2 months? Well, I didn't really buy much in April, and I figured, well, what I did buy, I'll just roll over into May, where I actually did wind up acquiring quite a bit in May. And so, without further ado, we're going to start with movies, specifically DVDs. That's right, in the year of our Lord 2023, I bought more DVDs. And the first one I'm going to start with, I bought solely to appease the demons that live inside my head. And that movie is Spider-Man. Yes, the Sam Raimi first Spider-Man movie I bought, and the reason I bought it, I got it at a thrift store. I think I paid about $3 for it. The reason I bought it was solely because I was recently given my mother and stepfather's DVD collection. They're moving on. I'm not. And so, as I was going through these movies, deciding what ones I wanted to keep or what ones I wanted to toss out, I decided that I wanted to keep Spider-Man 2. But there was no Spider-Man with it. And the fact that I had 2 and not 1 bothered me. And so while walking through a thrift store, I decided that I should buy this to quiet the demons that live inside my soul. Fun fact, as I was looking at that Spider-Man 2 copy that my mother and stepfather gave me, it still had the sticker from the local mom and pop video rental store that went out of business quite a few years ago. So good on them for putting a local business out of business. But nonetheless, Spider-Man. There might be some value to it in that there are, special features that may not have carried over onto the Blu-ray. So as I look through it, maybe I'll go through it. It has the Chad Kroeger Hero video. So you can watch that and think about the era of 9/11 where that song was absolutely everywhere. It also has the HBO Making of Spider-Man, which I believed I watched. I was really into this movie when it came out. I had a ton of magazines about it. It was right when I was getting into comic books. And so I do like this movie quite a bit, but the only reason I own it now on DVD is because my brain told me I can't have 2 without having 1. I can avoid having 3, but I can't break the sequence. So, in a similar vein to the special features that are on that movie, I did buy 3 DVDs here, 3 DVD sets, specifically because I kind of wanted the special features in them. And I purchased the Special Edition collection of Die Hard, Die Hard 2, and Die Hard with a Vengeance. I really like these movies, not so much Die Hard 2. Die Hard 2 doesn't really matter, to be honest. If you've never seen Die Hard, just watch the first one and then Die Hard 3 because they are interconnected. Die Hard 2, it's a fine movie. I don't dislike Die Hard 2. It is a fun movie. But it's kind of ridiculous that this sort of thing is happening to this just beat cop again. Die Hard 3 makes sense because it ties directly into Die Hard 1 because of, their story plots. It has to do with Jeremy Irons' character, Gruber. Peter Gruber? Peter Gruber. That's right. Because they do the biblical thing with Simon and Peter, because Simon says, and his name is Peter, but regardless. Peter Gruber is Hans Gruber's brother from the first movie, and that makes sense. But him just being in an airport during another terrorist attack doesn't make all that much sense, and the less we talk about the movies that come after Die Hard with a Vengeance, the better. But nonetheless, there are a lot of bonus features on here, and a lot of these features don't wind up on Blu-ray collections. So I figured, why not? I already own at least, the first 3 movies on Blu-ray, but these were actually $3 for the whole set. So why not? There's probably some stuff in here that would be fun to, watch or listen to. So I figured, whatever, I can have more clutter in my apartment and put these on my DVD shelf that's now growing with Spider-Man 1. But I'm happy to own Die Hard 1 through 3. I have to own Die Hard 2 because I would be sequence breaking, but nonetheless, if you have never seen these films, watch the first one and the third one. The third one is my favorite. Everybody loves the original Die Hard. It is a fantastic movie, but so much of being a kid reminds me of Die Hard 3 because I watched it all the time with my brothers. And Samuel L. Jackson is great in that movie. I like him in that movie more than I like him in movies where he's more of a badass. I love his character in Die Hard 3 just because he's a guy who just gets roped into this stuff. And he's actually a lot like John McClane's character in the first movie, where John McClane's been through this stuff before because he's been through Die Hard 1 and 2, and now Samuel L. Jackson's character Zeus is now roped into all of this by the madman that's Peter Gruber. And so, yeah, I'm happy to own these films. Moving on, we're adding a new segment, I guess. More things I waste money on. Comic books. I was at a local antique store. They had a ton of comics, a very good comic section, and I was there during a buy one, get one sale, and so each of these books is overpriced in my opinion. They're $2, but I basically got them for $1 a piece. I used to buy comics a lot. I as you may tell, I'm a big fan of Thor and Captain America. I used to buy weekly comics. The last run I really, really liked was when Rick Remender was on Cap. And I hope I'm saying, I've never heard his name out loud, so I don't know if it's Remender or I'm saying it completely wrong. But I really loved his Castaway and Dimension Z storyline. He was doing that with John Romita Jr., and I loved that storyline. And then, to me, comics just got a lot lazy. The art kind of went downhill. The stories were just retreads of story beats that had already happened. I mean, we were doing Civil War II, which to me felt very lazy. And regardless, I kind of fell away from comic books, but I do like to buy these older issues. And so these are just characters that I like. So we of course have Captain America, Revolution 1993. Another Captain America. Captain America, Would You Believe the Porcupine? Superman. I love these Superman comics where you don't know what the hell is happening to Superman. I see and hear everything on Earth all at once. It's turning me into a supermaniac. How can Phantom Superman save these kids? Here's just Superman looking at himself in the mirror, and the mirror's being mean to him. Superman, there's nothing I can do to save Lois and Lana. Find a cure from them, Luthor, and I'll do anything you ask. Ha ha, Superman. That's the biggest joke I ever heard. I like Lex Luthor. I share a birthday with Lex Luthor. You destroyed everything I loved, Superman. Now I'll do the same for you, as giant Lex Luthor destroys the Daily Planet. Captain America. Today, Captain America is forced to reenact the most tragic day of his life. Will Bucky die again? I'm going to say yes. The thing, though, was when this comic was published, there was no Winter Soldier yet. And so I'm going to say Bucky probably died again in this book. Just a Captain America comic. There's no funny catchphrase or anything. And then the Shadow War of Hawkman. I like Hawkman. A character that has been completely destroyed by retcons, but I prefer the Thanagarian policeman, which this is, versus the reincarnation of Cotter Hall and all of that. I actually like him being an alien policeman more than I like him being constantly reincarnated. But comics, I paid 2, 4, 6, 8, 10... I paid $6 for all of these. So, I'm happy to have them. I'm going to read them at some point. I actually do read my comics. I don't just sit out. But we'll move on to video games. So, as I was going around some antique stores, I always keep an eye out for video games that wind up in antique stores. And, you can never tell what games are going to wind up where, but I went into a very impressive store. First time I had ever been in there, and they had quite a video game selection. Most of them admittedly overpriced, but as I looked through their second-gen stuff, I decided to pick up a few. So I got 2 Spectravision Atari games. I got Gangster Alley and Planet Patrol. Both work fine. Both are fine second-gen Atari games. Play fine. I'm trying to, for the life of me, remember what exactly they look like, because it's been a while since I bought these. But nonetheless, I tested them. They work just fine. I do like my second-gen stuff, which continues on because it's the same place. I bought 3 ColecoVision games. So we have Cosmic Avenger. We have, this is a classic, I own this on Atari 5200, but I wanted it on ColecoVision as well. Gorf, which Gorf is just a combination of other games. It's Space Invaders, and I think it becomes Asteroids, or something like that. But yeah, it's an interesting game. And then classic ColecoVision game, only playable with the ColecoVision steering wheel, Turbo, which I didn't own. I did wind up with the steering wheel a few years ago, just through buying lots, but I actually didn't have Turbo. So moving on with more games. Another sign of my mental illness, I had to buy this. It's Night Trap for Sega CD, and it's only disc 1. Why did I have to buy disc 1? Well, I bought a lot when I bought my Sega CD. My first, my Model 1 Sega CD came with a bunch of Sega CD games. I have a ton of duplicates just from buying that lot. I think I have 4 or 5 copies of the Sega Classics plus Sherlock Holmes. But when I was going through it, I only had disc 2 for Night Trap. And so I hung on to that until I managed to see an auction that had just disc 1 for Night Trap. And so yes, I bought disc 1 for Night Trap so I could have a complete collection. There was a yard sale across from my brother. And so my brother lives in a small town, and you never know what you're going to find in a small town. And so right across the street from him, there was an auction. And he sent me a yard sale. He sent me a, hey, do you want one of these items? And so what it was a lot. Super Nintendo lot. Now, I didn't need a Super Nintendo console, I already have one. But that's not really what interested me. So there were quite a few games in this Super Nintendo lot. And so I have them all right here, and we'll go through them. So the first one is NBA Showdown. Not a basketball fan, but it was just in the box. Super Mario World, already own a copy of Super Mario World. This was not a big get. NBA Live, 96. Again, not a big basketball fan. Like NBA Jam, but, you know. Oh, more basketball. Bulls versus Blazers. So you don't even get the fun. It's just the Bulls and the Blazers. Like slightly more than basketball, John Madden Football. And so we have Madden here. And oh, look at that. NBA Live 96 again. Yes, from the same lot. So as you can tell, I was not particularly enthused with that group of games right there. It's more these next few that I will go through that I will say that I'm happy to have. So this is another duplicate of a game that I do already own. But look, I got a nice little case with it. What is it? Well, it's Mario Kart. So I already had a copy of Mario Kart, but I didn't have the manual. And it's nice to have one of these little cases. So this I thought was, you know, a nice little thing to have because I actually now have the manual to Mario Kart. I've never in my life had the manual to Mario Kart because most of the time when you buy one of these games, it's just a loose cart like this, and you go and you buy it, you get it from a friend, you get it at a video game store. It's not often you see the manuals to these things, so I was happy to get that. These next set of games are the ones that made me decide to get this lot. As you'll see, these are all from a former Hollywood Video. And so some of them still have Hollywood Video stickers on them. So the first one was actually a game that I didn't think that I would have any interest in. There was a slight interest because of the time that it's from and where I grew up. And it is Ken Griffey Jr. Winning Run. And so I am from the Pacific Northwest. In the 90s, 2000s, Ken Griffey Jr. was the man. You know, he was, you know, King Mariner. This was the big time for the Seattle Mariners. Everybody knew Ken Griffey Jr. You know, fat little kids like me who had no hope of playing baseball idolized Ken Griffey Jr. And I thought, okay, that's kind of appropriate for the era. That's what it was like when I was a kid. And when I popped this game in, I was very impressed by this. This is actually a very advanced game from when it came out. And I did look it up, but this was really impressive. And so I think, yeah, it's a fine-looking baseball game, and it's a better game than basketball. And so, again, that was a pleasant surprise. Now moving into the ones that really made my decision. First up is Contra 3. Didn't own Contra 3. I like Contra games, and I figured, why not? I'll get all the other games with it. I'll walk with Contra 3. Next, another game that I did not own, that I should have owned, Castlevania 4. I do enjoy the Castlevania games, but I have been sporadic in the ones that I have played. And so I know there's people who consider this to be one of the best. I just have not had the opportunity to own it. And so, yeah, I'm happy to have Castlevania 4. Next, oh, what a wondrous fighting game we have here. Shaq Fu. This is the first time I've ever played Shaq Fu. It's an oddity that I wanted to own just because this game wound up at a yard sale across from my brother's house in a small town in Idaho. Of course I've got to buy Shaq Fu. Finally, the big one that motivated me, because this is the king of why the hell would they make that video games? Home Improvement! Yes, the Home Improvement video game, where you go through, and because he does a TV show, he fights on the lots of other shows, meaning robotic dinosaurs and other things attack Tim the Toolman Taylor. The thing that is most frustrating about this game is not only did they put Hollywood Video stickers on it, they carved property of Hollywood Video into the plastic. I've never seen someplace do that, and all of the other Hollywood Video games don't have that. Someone carved property of Hollywood Video into the plastic. But it makes it more interesting, I guess. Moving on, I went to a video game store in another small town in Idaho. I was for work, I travel sometimes for work, was in the town of Grangeville, Idaho, a small town. It's about an hour from where I grew up. We were kind of sports rivals. And I was in downtown Grangeville, and they had a video game store. And I was shocked. Town that size didn't have a video game store. And so I popped my head in. And they had a decent selection. And so I was very kind of quickly looking through what they had there. It's that awkward thing where you're in there in the middle of the day on a Thursday, and you're trying to figure out, to buy something. It's awkward. The owner is just staring at you. You've got a sweat going. And so I decided to pull the trigger on some games in the glass case, and it kind of took the fellow by surprise because I was buying something that was not common for most people, especially from a guy who was in a suit. I just come in what I was wearing for work, and so I was in a suit that day. And turned out chatting with this guy. He's a collector as well. He runs a video game store. It's a pretty good chance that he's a collector. And it was just a really lovely experience. And I will hopefully next time I'm down that way go back into the store. But what I wound up buying were some 3DO games. And so this is a common 3DO title, Mad Dog McCree. I never owned it. But I figured, why the heck not? It was a decently priced game. I might as well get what was in the store for the 3DO. They had 3 games posted in the case. He actually told me that he had more, but I wanted to go with the 3. So Mad Dog McCree, this is the reason that I bought any 3DO titles at all. It's Microcosm. Kind of an inner space type game. You're going inside someone. This is the game that kind of sold me. And this one I didn't care about at all, but again, decently priced. I added to my 3DO collection. It's FIFA. If there's any sport that I care less about than basketball, it's FIFA, or soccer, or football, or whatever the hell you want to call it. I don't really care all that much about soccer. Nonetheless, it was something to add to my 3DO collection. Moving forward, I have some more video games that are a little bit more modern. So I have a friend who is kind of stuck in the original Xbox era. He doesn't really play much beyond that. I think the only game he plays more beyond that is Skyrim. One of my greatest shames in collecting video games, or in playing video games in general, is that it took me a very long time to fall in love with BioWare. So my first BioWare game was the first Mass Effect game, which I played after Mass Effect 2 had come out. I did that because, again, I didn't want to skip to the one that everybody was talking, so wonderfully about, which was Mass Effect 2. I had to play for the first one, and I actually like Mass Effect 1 more than the others. But as a Star Wars fan and as a BioWare fan, it is my great shame that Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic passed me by. I was an EU guy, but I was post Return of the Jedi. I loved Heir to the Empire. I loved all of the books that took place after Return of the Jedi rather than the stuff before. And so I just kind of ignored most of stuff like Knights of the Old Republic. I do own the first one. I still need to play through it. My buddy Carl is driving me up a wall getting me to play this game. But I was in a store and this was decently priced, and so I bought Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, which he swears is better than the first one. I've heard people say that there's a lot of flaws with this one, but I own it, and someday I'll get to it, and someday I'll make Carl happy. Moving on, I bought a few Wii U games. So I had a Wii U, I got a Wii U back when they were somewhat relevant, and I got it for nothing. A friend of mine, Sean, was moving out of the area. He was kind of changing up his life, and he was kind of basically selling off everything he owned. And he came to me and he said, "Hey, do you want my Wii U?" And I really, really did. And he said, "I'll sell it to you for $75. And at that time, I was just a broke college student. I was making nothing at a radio station job. I was living off of student loans. And I really did want it. And I said, "Listen, I just go to a GameStop or something and sell it. I can't even afford the $75. And he gave it to me. He just, said, "You know what? Have it." He gave me his Wii U, and it's one of the Zelda Wii U's. And so I was really happy to have it. And for a long time, all I had for my Wii U was, hey, there's a hot rod outside. All I ever had for my Wii U was Splatoon, and I love the first Splatoon. But as time wore on, I bought more games for it. But right here are a few ones that I have just kind of sat on and just decided to pull the trigger on with some pocket change. Lego City Undercover. I know a ton of kids love this game. This was somewhat like GTA, but for kids. I figured, why the hell not? It was cheap, so I bought it. Next one, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. This is already on the Switch, but again, adding to my Wii U collection to have something respectable for it. I've heard great things about this. I haven't played it because even though I had a Wii U, I didn't play it all that much except for Splatoon and a few other games. And this is the one that I fought me the most. So this is Wind Waker HD. I don't like Wind Waker all that much. I know that's a thing that I'm sure drives a lot of people crazy, but I was not a big fan of Toon Link and this art style. I just was not. And so when Sean gave me the console, he actually had this downloaded onto the console. And for a long time, I still had access to it through his download. Eventually, I did have to reset the console. I lost access to everything that was through his account. But for a long time, I did have this game. Barely ever played it. But I was in the shop, and I figured, you know what? This is one of those games that you have when you have the Wii U. And so I figured, Wind Waker HD, sure, let's go for it. Maybe I'll replay it, and maybe I'll love it. Maybe there's something that I missed when it was on GameCube, but I just did not like it. I remember when it came out, I had it, and I had the Zelda collection. And I spent so much more time playing the games on the Zelda collection than I ever did on Wind Waker. Speaking of GameCube, this is one that I have that is sealed. It's probably a reseal, but nonetheless, it's in really good shape. And it is the Resident Evil 2 version, Resident Evil 2 GameCube version. This is my favorite Resident Evil game. It's my favorite. I wouldn't say it's the best. It's my favorite. What I consider to be the best is Resident Evil Remake. This is part of that weird Nintendo deal that Capcom struck, where they got all of the Resident Evils. At least they got 0 through Resident Evil 4. Or I guess Resident Evil 1 Remake, Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil 3, the original Resident Evil Code Veronica X version, Resident Evil 0, and then Resident Evil 4. It's very strange. I own Resident Evil 0. I own 2 copies of Resident Evil 0 that I just acquired through lots. 2 copies of 0, Remake, which we got back when I was a kid, Resident Evil 4, and then Resident Evil 3 on GameCube. All of those on GameCube. And we never got 2. And the reason behind that was because I was not the one making the purchase. It was my older brother. Despite the GameCube being mine, he was the one that was buying games for it. And he kind of misunderstood. So he thought 2 and 3 and everything like that, we're going to get a remake like Resident Evil 1 Remake. And so he bought 3. Don't ask me why he went directly to 3 over 2, but he did. And he considered it to be a bit of a disappointment. Now looking back, I can see all the advantages to having this on GameCube. But now these are pretty expensive. And I got a decent enough deal on this. It was packed in with a few other items that I bought here today. And so I'm happy to have it. I'm sure I overpaid for it. They did try to say the, well, it's sealed angle. I don't believe it was actually sealed. I believe this is a reseal. But nonetheless, it is a fine looking game. I know the disc is in there. If the disc isn't in there, well, we'll all have a chat at that store. But I'm pretty certain that the game is inside here. I can actually hear it. But Resident Evil 2 for GameCube, one of my favorites. So moving on, I actually do have more video games, but I'm going to move into toys for a second. So at one of the antique stores I went into, they had a marvelous toy section. And I bought 2 items in the toy section. One I sat on the fence with, and I finally came back later and bought it. And it was this, the Mars Attacks Brainwave Incinerator. I love Mars Attacks, and I love this dopey looking gun. The batteries are dead in it. It doesn't make its noise, but it's still in its box. And so I am very happy to own this. It's going to sit on top of my movie shelf, right next to my Audrey 2, my Terror Dog, and my Halloween 3 action figures, because I'm looking at it right at the corner of my eye. But I hesitated because I didn't know if I wanted this or not. I've got so much junk. And I decided, you know what, I've got to go back for the Mars Attacks Incinerator Raid. The other item at that very same antique store, I bought immediately. I bought it immediately because it was very important to me growing up. So, growing up, I had 2 older brothers that lived with me. They were considerably older than me. And so, one of the things that they loved when they were kids, that they forced onto me when I was a kid, was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While other kids were falling more in line with like SpongeBob and stuff like that, I don't really care about that. Pokemon is the best example. I was falling deeply in love with TMNT and Ghostbusters. Now, having older brothers, you are not allowed to like the same things your older brothers like. I was not allowed to like the same turtles that my brothers liked. One brother had called Raphael. One brother had called Leonardo. So my favorite was Donatello. I'm still a Donatello fan to this day. Same with the villains. One brother absolutely loved Shredder. The other one loved the Rat King. So what villain am I left with? Well, as a little blonde kid, I tended to gravitate towards blonde characters. I also tended to gravitate towards characters that were a little bit small, kind of weak, but had some sort of advantage, I guess. And in the 1987 Ninja Turtles, a weak, blonde villain was, of course, Baxter Stockman. I loved Baxter. I cannot explain to you why I love this character outside of the fact that I identified with him. I am literally dressed like the cartoon version of Baxter Stockman right now. And this is just clothes that I own. I didn't go out and buy these clothes. But I loved Baxter. The thing about the action figure that weirded me, that bothers me the most, is Baxter has orange hair in this for some reason. When in fact, Baxter had blonde hair, but his twin brother Barney had orange hair. From one episode where Barney showed up because they thought it was Baxter, but it wasn't, it was Barney. That's one weird episode of the 87 series. But we had this action figure. This action figure was bought for my older brothers, and I played with it a lot as a kid because Baxter was my favorite villain. And I walked into that antique store, and this, along with several other TMNT figures, were under glass. And I knew I had to buy Baxter. So this hangs in my game room right now. The only damage to it is a small crack on the bottom. It was decently priced, but yeah, it's my toy that I had to have. Next is another childhood thing that is horrifying and terrifying, so stay tuned for a little bit of child emotional trauma. This thing. Why am I bringing this up? Well, to waste your time and talk about this little dancing skeleton. So if you press this button, this skeleton is supposed to dance. So why is this thing terrifying and why do I have it? Well, in that very same antique store, I ran across this figure and I had like a war flashback. And the reason for that being, we had this when I was a kid. We had it in, I believe, the early 2000s. I adored this thing. I thought skeletons were cool. I thought the song Puttin' on the Ritz was cool, which he sings as he dances. And so we had a fireplace. We had a fireplace that had a stone pedestal in front of it that you could sit on and look into the fire. And I set this skeleton on that stone pedestal. Well, the fireplace kicked on. It was propane. And I wasn't paying attention. Now, he's made of very flammable material. So, given a few minutes, he was close enough to the heat, he went up in flames. And he started to dance. And I was absolutely terrified of this thing. So my dad ran over and they put out the fire and it was no issue, but the back of the skeleton was burned horribly. His skull was melted. The front was still intact and he actually could still dance and sing. Well, I was scared as hell of the thing. And my other brothers convinced me that it was out for revenge, that it wanted to hurt me, that it was possessed by a demon that wanted to enact revenge upon me for putting it too close to the fireplace because it could feel pain, I guess. And so I became absolutely terrified of the thing. My mother didn't want to get rid of it. She thought it was still cute and you couldn't see the damage. I tried very hard to dispose of it. I tried to throw it away. I tried to leave it outside. I could not get rid of the thing. Until finally I begged my mother to get rid of it. So she did. She got rid of it. And then one day I was in our attic. Now, my mother had a metal, kind of a metal closet, I guess you'd call it, a movable closet or an armoire or whatever, where she would store her winter clothes. And don't ask me why, but when I was in our attic, I decided that I was going to open that armoire, or metal closet, and guess who was in there? This thing. And it scared the ever-loving hell out of me. I was absolutely terrified. It was, to me, it feels like there was years apart where I had forgotten about it, but realistically, it was probably just about a month or two after I had asked her to get rid of it. And so finally, after finding me shrieking and terrified in the attic, my mother did actually get rid of it, and I actually got to see it be tossed into the county dump. And years later, thinking on that emotional trauma, I am in an antique store looking to buy video games, and who do I happen upon but my old friend, the skeleton. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to my mother. And she basically said, you need to buy it, you need to buy it, you need to buy it. And so thinking back on that horrible traumatic experience of my childhood, we got the skeleton. Oh, looks like I missed one video game too. So at that same video game store in Grangeville, I also purchased a TurboGrafx 16 game. This is Ninja Spirit. I played a little bit of it. Somebody claimed that it was complicated. I didn't seem to have an issue with it. It might just be that the first level is pretty easy. I didn't go much more beyond that, but Ninja Spirit. I buried it underneath the toys and stuff because it's a Hue card and it's very small. I really do like this form factor. I wish more games did this. I'm sure there's a reason this didn't catch on. Probably space limitations or cost of manufacture, but nonetheless, I like it. Finally, at a different video game store that I go to semi-frequently, I noticed they had these orange and multicolored bags. These are all PS3 games. So, the 360, PS3, Wii generation during the pandemic. Remember the pandemic? Weren't those kooky times? But during the pandemic, people were getting back into the 360, PS3 era. And that's probably just because the games were cheap at the time, the consoles were cheap at the time. A lot of people probably still had the consoles clunking around and figured, well, I'm stuck at home, I might as well play a video game, or I'll revisit games I loved when I was younger. People, who were maybe in their teens and now adults were going back and playing games. Now there's kind of a glut of 360 PS3 era games. Not so much Wii, but there's kind of a lot of them going back into circulation as those people post-pandemic are selling them off. They don't want them anymore. And so, in this case, the local store has made these mystery bags. I paid $12.99 for it, so we'll see if there are 4 games in here. And these are mystery bundles. The only thing that you get a hint in here is Dark Future. That's what it's called, Dark Future. And so it's we'll see what 4 games I got. Now, based off of Dark Future, I'm going to make some guesses. I'm going to guess Deus Ex is in here. That to me makes sense for Dark Future. Possibly Metal Gear Rising and Metal Gear Solid 4, although those are now the past. Metal Gear Solid 4 was in 2014, Rising was in 2018. But I'm going to guess they might be in here. Potentially Assassin's Creed, that's kind of in a weird area because it is Dark Future, but most of it's in the past. But I'm gonna say for Dark Future, we're gonna see a Deus Ex in here. So, let's see what we've got. All right, first one, Bulletstorm. Not what I expected, but that's the future. I know that. Dishonored. Still sealed. I don't know if that's reseal or not, but it is sealed. Fracture. I am unfamiliar with Fracture. Reshape the battlefield, reshape the battle. In the year 2161, survival of the fittest will take on a whole new meaning. Cybernetically enhanced forces will battle a genetically engineered army from the west, utilizing never-before seen terrain-deforming weapons. The battlefield will never be the same. Okay, I'm not familiar with that. And Infamous 2. This is actually the only game that I own already for PS3. So this is the only duplicate that I actually have here. I do own I do own this for PS3 already, and a few of the other. I know I own Dishonored for Xbox 360, but nonetheless, that was a pleasant surprise. I hope you've enjoyed this peek into how I waste my money, and I hope you've enjoyed the little sentiments that I gave about my terrifying childhood. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.